All right, welcome to the first video in our series on the large major project of AP Computer Science, which is a project we call VisiCalc. Some people call this project Text Excel. The idea is that we're going to be building a program that looks like a spreadsheet, like Microsoft Excel. I like to call this project VisiCalc because it pays tribute to the original spreadsheet software, which came out it's going to be 35 years ago or so, almost 40 years ago. And it played a major role in the history of Apple and their sustaining as a company. And so here we are making VisiCalc. So the idea is we want to make a spreadsheet. In this particular program, it's going to be a grid of cells. And a cell will be an object whose job it is to hold a value. And in our code, we're going to have different kinds of cells. We're not just going to hold just numbers, but sometimes we will hold text, sometimes we will hold dates, and then by the end of the project, we're going to even define formulas. And what's really cool about formulas is we'll be able to describe a relationship between multiple cells and values and compute it, and every time our spreadsheet updates, the values of our formulas will change. So if I have a formula that says, A1 times B3 minus 7, my program will be able to look for the value in A1, the value in B3, pull those numbers, put them in the formula, and update it. So that's pretty cool. All right, so checkpoint 1 is actually meant to be very simple. The goal is let's get the user input loop up off the ground, and let's make sure we know what files we want. So let me just demonstrate the functionality that's required for starters. For starters, we want to greet the user, right? Always be nice to your user because you need them to be nice to you. There's only 3 types of commands that you can be using at this point. So the first command would be, I could say help, and now I've skimped out here, but I'm expecting an 100-word or more help menu from everybody. And this is actually going to be my measurement for how well do you understand the VisiCalc program. I want you to be able to explain all the different types of commands that go in and what they should expect. I would think that if you pulled any student out of the hallway who did not know how to use your program and they hit help, that would be a sufficient amount of information for them to understand what to do. So if you just say VisiCalc is a spreadsheet program, you wouldn't get credit for your help menu. I'm looking for something detailed, something written in your own words. So that's help. Then I could say any command I want, and right now, because we haven't built any of the functionality in, it just is going to echo back. So if I say help, I get the help command. If I do anything, it just echoes it back to the screen. Like I could type mango, banana, and it just echoes it back to the screen for me. The third and final command is called quit, and it's where it exits your program. Now, all of this is really managed in the client class, which I've called VisiCalc.java. I'm not going to show my code because that's the point of this checkpoint. I want you to write that code. I want you to set up your user input loop. I want you to have a while loop that continues to run until quit is said. I want you to recognize if the input was help, call your print help print help menu method, and if it wasn't quit, if it wasn't help, I want you to echo that functionality back to the screen. What I do want to talk about are the file structures we're using for this particular project. So VisiCalc's the client. It's where we're going to handle all the commands. But then I have set up 5 helper classes. And I want to start by saying there are many ways, dozens, hundreds of ways that we could tackle this problem. And you might be thinking to yourself, oh, I would use fewer helper classes, or I would use more helper classes, or that's not the way I would set it up, which I respect. One of the things I love about programming is it's an act of creativity, right? Every person who starts this project is going to have their own individual view. I am, sadly, going to curb that creativity just slightly, in that I'm going to mandate that these are the 6 classes you use, and I'm going to make some requirements about how you're going to use them. I'm doing this for 2 reasons. One, VisiCalc is a big jump in understanding. It's our first time going from a single project, where a single file project where everything is contained in one class. It's got the helper method, right? That's how fraction calculator worked. That's how all of our other projects worked. So because of the level of difficulty, I am just going to try to give us a little bit of structure to play within, so that it's not quite so overwhelming, number one. Number two, if your design is radically different than the person sitting next to you, then when it comes time to collaborate and help debug each other's code, if they're using 7 or 8 classes that you don't recognize, that wasn't a part of your design, it will not help you at all. It won't give you any insight, and you probably won't be able to help them at all. So I'm going to require, these are the 6 classes for the project. All you have to do for this first checkpoint is the user input loop, and then you're going to build the 5 helper classes as well. I want to talk about what these are going to do, what these classes should look like, and I'm actually going to show my code, which means it's my expectation that all of you will build your classes this way. So first things first, always put a header in. I can't tell you the number of times a piece of code comes to me and I can't figure out whose it is. So right, we say the project, the author, the class. We're going to identify this as a helper class. And this is one other piece of standardization that I think is important. I'm going to ask that we all, in our grid class, is where we're going to put the multidimensional array of cells. And I want it named spreadsheet. And I know there's probably an identifier you prefer, and I get that. But if everybody picks a different identifier name for this, when I'm looking through the code later, I'm going to have a hard time recognizing that you're actually dealing with the multidimensional array if you don't use this name. So this is one other way in which I'm constraining your creativity. Many apologies. There are going to be a ton of methods and useful things done here in grid that all happens in later checkpoints, so we don't need to see that now. So please build your grid class thusly. The cell class, again, I've got my header. I haven't put it in yet, and it isn't a part of this checkpoint, but I do want you thinking about how would we store a single number in each of our cells. So we talk about helper classes having state and behavior. I'm not talking about a method, so I'm talking about what would the state be, what would the type be, and what would you name the single number stored in cell. Think about that. Then it gets interesting. Then we're going to have public class text cell extends cell. So text cell is going to be a subclass of cell, and its job is going to be to store some text. So the state of text cell will be, one field stores text. We should know when we talk text in Java what that really means. I want to point out that the design that I'm going to force here is got some imperfections. For example, the fact that I'm extending cell means that text cell will inherit the field that we're going to provide in cell. And I know that's less than ideal because if I'm a text cell, I'm never going to want to care about having a number. That seems a little bit useless. So the question is, why am I forcing this awkward inheritance? And the reason, hang on, Freya, I'm not done recording my video. The reason that we're going to do this is because in cell, we're going to define several methods. Chief among them is toString. And I want to see that students have the ability to understand how methods get inherited and then how we can override those methods and demonstrate polymorphism later. So cell will define a toString. Text cell is the child of cell. When it inherits toString, it's going to toString a little bit differently because it's not showing a number. It's showing a piece of text. So text cell is a child of cell. Date cell is a child of cell. Formula cell is a child of cell. This allows us also to, if I'm making a two-dimensional array of cells, we can put any of these things in these cells, right? So you could have text cells, date cells, formula cells, and regular cells can all live in spreadsheets somewhere when they get put in. So that's another reason we're using this inheritance model. Date cell, it's going to have 3 fields that represent numbers. So for month, day, and year. I'll let you figure out how you want to do that. Again, that's for later checkpoints. This is just something to think about now. And then formula cell is what we get to last. It's easily the most complicated part of the project. The question is going to be, if I want to store a formula in a cell, and that formula is going to refer to other cells and other numbers, how can I make sure that if the cells my formula refers to, if those values change, how will my formula cell continue to update? And what I'm driving at is that in formula cell, I'm going to have to store the formula. And I'm going to ask you to think about it. What is that going to look like? How do I store the formula? What would the type of that be? We'll be discussing this more later, but I just want you thinking about it now. So in summary, when you turn this checkpoint in, turn in 6 files, the 6 files I've shown you here. The VisiCalc should have the functionality that I demonstrated in the console. And please build your 5 helper classes as I have shown with headers. And then we will record the next video where we talk about how to print the contents of spreadsheet. That's going to be the next thing we do, is we print the contents of spreadsheet. All right, thanks for watching.